In 67 years of life, Leonardo da Vinci completed fewer than 20 paintings. Some scholars count 15, some count 12. The exact number depends on how generously you define finished. The man we call history's greatest genius, the painter of the Monalisa, the mind behind flying machines and anatomical drawings that wouldn't be surpassed for centuries, spent most of his career not finishing things. The adoration of the Magi, abandoned. Saint Jerome in the wilderness, abandoned. The greatest equestrian statue ever conceived, never cast. A mural commissioned by the city of Florence to commemorate their greatest military victory, left to rot on the wall. His notebooks contain 7,200 pages of ideas, questions, sketches, and inventions, most of which he never published, never built, never showed anyone. This wasn't laziness. This wasn't lack of talent. Something else was happening inside Leonardo's mind, and understanding what that was might explain more about genius and its costs than any finished masterpiece ever could. In 1481, Leonardo received what should have been the commission of his career. The monks of San Donato a Scopeto hired him to paint an altarpiece, the Adoration of the Magi. It was a major work, a chance to establish himself as Florence's leading painter at just 29 years old. He threw himself into it. The preparatory drawings were extraordinary. More than 100 figures, complex perspective studies, architectural frameworks no one had attempted before. The underpainting he began showed flashes of what the finished work might become. Then, he stopped. 15 months into the project, Leonardo left Florence for Milan. The painting remained in the monastery, unfinished. It would stay that way for the rest of his life. The monks eventually hired someone else. This pattern repeated, again and again. The Sforza horse, a bronze monument to the Duke of Milan's father, consumed Leonardo for 16 years. He built a 24-foot clay model that stunned everyone who saw it. Crowds gathered just to look at it. The bronze was allocated for casting. Then, war came. The bronze was melted into cannons. The clay model was used for target practice by French soldiers. It was destroyed. Leonardo never tried again. When he died in 1519, he left behind a trail of commissions unfulfilled, patrons frustrated, and masterpieces that existed only as sketches or crumbling experiments. But he also left behind those notebooks. The notebooks survived by accident. Leonardo never published them. He never organized them into anything coherent. They were working documents, chaotic, personal, written in mirror script that most people couldn't read. After his death, his student, Francesco Melzi, inherited them. Melzi spent decades trying to compile them into something publishable. He failed. After Melzi died, the notebooks scattered across Europe, sold, stolen, lost, forgotten. What remains today is still over 7,000 pages. They contain anatomical drawings so precise that medical students used them into the 20th century. Studies of water flow that anticipated fluid dynamics by 200 years. Designs for flying machines, armored vehicles, self-propelled carts. Observations on optics, geology, botany, architecture. And questions. Thousands of questions. Describe the tongue of the woodpecker. Why is the fish in the water swifter than the bird in the air when it ought to be the contrary, since water is heavier than air? Describe how the clouds are formed and how they dissolve. On one page, Leonardo lists things he needs to learn that day. Get the master of arithmetic to show him how to square a triangle. Ask a bombardier how the Tower of Ferrara is walled. Find out how people walk on ice in Flanders. These weren't assignments. No one asked him to investigate these things. No patron was waiting. No deadline loomed. Leonardo simply needed to know. There's a word for what Leonardo had. Modern psychologists might call it hyperfocus, or distractibility, or obsessive curiosity. Leonardo called it something else. In his notes, he describes the experience of beginning one investigation and finding that it opened into 5 more. Each answer revealed new questions. Each question demanded new experiments. He wanted to paint the human smile, so he dissected cadavers to understand which muscles moved the lips. But the muscles of the face connected to the muscles of the neck, which connected to the spine, which raised questions about the nervous system, which led him to wonder how sensation travels from the fingertips to the brain. One painting, 30 corpses, years of study. And the painting, the Monalisa, he carried with him for 16 years, adding layers, adjusting, never declaring it complete. He couldn't stop pulling the thread. A contemporary who knew Leonardo described him as a man who would walk through the marketplace with a small notebook hanging from his belt, stopping constantly to sketch a face, a gesture, the way light fell on a piece of fabric. He once wrote, "The eye, which is called the window of the soul, is the principal means by which the brain can most abundantly appreciate the infinite works of nature." This was not a man who could look at a bird and simply see a bird. He saw a problem, a system, a question that demanded investigation. And investigation doesn't have a finish line. Here's what nobody talks about with a mind like this: the internal monologue, the loop that doesn't stop, the voice that says, "This isn't good enough yet," or "You missed something," or "One more question before you can rest." Leonardo's notebooks are full of self-instruction, directives to himself, tasks, reminders. If you've ever felt trapped in that loop, if your mind works against you instead of for you, there's an app called affirmations.app designed for exactly that. A daily practice for shaping what your mind reaches for by default. Link in the description. Leonardo knew what he was. In draft after draft of letters to his patrons, preserved in his notebooks, he apologized, explained, made excuses, promised to do better. To the Duke of Milan, after years of delays on the horse monument, "Of the horse I will say nothing, because I know the times are bad." To the same Duke, on a separate occasion, "It vexes me greatly that, having to earn my living, has forced me to interrupt the work and attend to small matters, instead of following up the work your lordship entrusted to me." Small matters. Leonardo considered earning a living, the commissions, the paintings, the deliverables, to be interruptions, distractions from the real work, which was the endless investigation he conducted in private. He was often broke. He was rarely employed for long. Patrons loved his genius, but couldn't tolerate his pace. His father, a successful notary, watched his illegitimate son waste decades on projects that never materialized. When his father died, Leonardo's half-brothers contested his inheritance. He spent years in court fighting for what was his. The notebooks contain a drawing, an old man facing a young boy. Leonardo drew variations of this image throughout his life, the craggy, aging figure confronting the soft, youthful one. Scholars believe the old man was a self-portrait, a projection of what he feared becoming. He wrote beneath one such drawing, "The eye is the window of the soul." But windows work both ways. Here's what Leonardo understood that his critics didn't. Finishing is a kind of death. When you declare something complete, you stop looking at it. You stop seeing what it could become. You close the window. Leonardo's unfinished works weren't failures. They were ongoing experiments. The Mona Lisa wasn't a portrait. It was a laboratory for studying light, shadow, and human expression. He kept it with him for 16 years because he kept learning from it. The notebooks weren't meant for publication. They were meant for him. A system for processing reality. A method for never stopping. Near the end of his life, Leonardo was working on a geometry problem. Mid-sentence, he stopped writing. The last line reads, "Because the soup is getting cold." He never returned to that page. Leonardo da Vinci left behind a portrait that has been seen by more human beings than any other image in history. He left behind notebooks that anticipated scientific discoveries by centuries. He left behind questions that still haven't been answered. He finished almost nothing, and everything he touched is still teaching us.